Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, we are officially kicking off the Midnight Prep series for gold making, where hopefully by the time the expansion releases, you are going to know everything that you need to know to have a great start of the expansion. If you guys are new here, I have done a preparation series for Dragonflight as well as the War Within, and this is going to work basically the same. Today's video, we're going to be talking about some non-changes, as well as some just generic changes happening to professions as a whole, as well as give you a few sneak peeks of things to look forward to, and then in every video after this, it will actually be dedicated to a specific profession, where we'll actually get into the nitty-gritty about, what sort of specialization changes there are, the new items, and all of that. And so that means if you guys do have any specific questions or you really want to see a specific profession first, feel free to leave that in the comments down below, and I'll use that to kind of gauge everybody's interest to see what professions to target first. But without further ado, let's dive right in, and thank you guys so much for watching. And so to get started, the first thing I want to cover is just some generic information about the new professions. To kind of ease everybody's mind, since I know not everybody has access to beta, but currently, if you are comfortable with the War Within professions, you are going to be okay in Midnight. This will be either pretty good news or pretty bad news, depending on how you like current professions, but Midnight is setting up to be very, very similar. We still have these same sort of profession stats, so if you know what multi-craft is, resourcefulness is, ingenuity, concentration, and all of that, if you understand crafting orders, knowledge points, specialization trees, all of that is pretty much staying the same. So if you have some sort of way that you're making gold right now in current content, you will likely be able to just strictly continue that in the new expansion. Now, breaking it down a little bit further, I would say right now in current content, and remember, I don't really talk about farming, I'm just going to really talk about crafting, I would say there's kind of three main ways to make gold right now for current content. The first one would be crafting orders, right? Whether you're in a competitive realm or a realm that has a lot of players in it, or maybe you're a part of a guild who you need to supply a lot of items to players, a lot of people can make gold via crafting orders. People need high-end gear, weapons, and all of that, and if you're somebody who right now is successful with crafting orders, that will probably be your go-to in Midnight. That system really is not changing at all, and that will still be a great way to make gold. Secondly, and we'll talk about this more in other videos, but alt armies is still going to be super, super beneficial. Concentration is staying in the game, we still have ingenuity, which means being able to produce an item at a cheaper cost, but then use concentration to make sure it's the highest quality possible, that is going to have your biggest profit margin, and because concentration is limited, the more alts you have, the better. Also, tailoring bolts are not going anywhere, the cooldowns are back, so if you are somebody who did a lot of bolt cooldown crafting with alts and all of that, that is also an option for you. The third kind of gold making method might be two methods depending on how you want to think of it, but I would say it's kind of your generic / reagent crafter. What I mean by this is if you're somebody who's a little bit more casual, you might focus on the more easy items, like cosmetic items or bags. Every expansion we get better and bigger bags, so focusing on things like that where you don't have to really worry about quality, multi-craft, resourcefulness does help, but there's kind of cheaper things that you can just easily produce without having to go crazy with specializations. And then also what kind of fills in this category is kind of your mass crafting of reagents. Something that I have done up to honestly very, very recently is because of my tailoring skill is so high, I can guarantee quality 3 bolts. And with my multi-craft and all of that, I can mass craft tailoring bolts, and that is also profitable. Now, the margin is probably less per item because I'm not using concentration, and I have to use that higher quality mat, which has a higher price, but because I can mass produce it, it's basically as long as I can AFK craft and sell in the auction house, I can make as much gold as possible. Now, with Midnight, kind of a fourth tier, I would say, of gold making comes to play, and we already see it in the latest patch, but this is housing decor. I do actually have a dedicated video about crafting and flipping decor, which we're not really going to talk about here, but in Midnight, every single crafting profession is getting new decor recipes. So if you're somebody who either flips decor or if you farm lumber yourself and craft it, that is going to be more items and more opportunity for you to make gold. The biggest thing I will say here is if you are somebody who has learned all of the decor recipes, 99% of them have come from profession trainers, with the exception of like WoD Trainor, which requires a vendor. But in Midnight, a lot of these decor does not come from a trainer. Some of them either require the Artisan Acuity equivalent, which we'll talk about in just a second, meaning you have to buy it from a vendor. Some of them are world drops that come out of treasure chest and trunks. Others are like boss drops, which is something that, you're either gonna have to farm, or maybe if it's BOE, you'll buy it off the auction house. And some of them are also questing rewards. So these decor is not going to be as simple as day one, you go to the trainer, you buy them, and then you're good to go. These are recipes that you're going to have to seek out, and if that's something you want to focus on, getting that recipe first could be super, super beneficial. But with that out of the way, hopefully your mind is a little bit more at ease. Midnight is not going to be a drastic change where you have to relearn professions altogether. In general, if you're pretty comfortable with how the War Within is, you'll be good for Midnight. Now, with that being said, there are some changes coming that's going to affect all professions, and I definitely want to lay them out here so you know. The biggest one is that there are now going to be only 2 levels of quality for reagents and consumables. Right now in the War Within, how it works is that gear has 5 quality levels, ranking from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best, and materials and potions and things like that have a quality of 1, 2, and 3. In Midnight, the armor quality is staying the same, so you will have all 5 tiers. However, materials as well as like enchants and things like that is only going to have 2 qualities. You could call it quality 1 and quality 2, you could call it low and high, doesn't really matter, but that's going to kind of simplify your inventory and you're not going to have to deal with these like 3 layers of things. Up next, probably the biggest change in the thing that really is going to affect a lot of people is the new Artisan Acuity. In Midnight, the new name is Moxie, so I'm going to refer to it as Moxie from now on, but Artisan Moxie is going to look a little bit and behave a little bit different in this expansion. The first thing you'll notice is if we go in game, I don't have any Artisan Moxie in my inventory. And that is because at the current state of beta, it is technically a currency, and you'll see that I actually have 2 different types on this character. The biggest and most drastic profession change I would say is that Artisan Moxie is going from a character-specific item to a profession-specific resource. In the past, the big thing in the War Within, and the most controversial thing I would say, was the profession shuffling to get a bunch of Artisan Acuity at the start of the expansion. Artisan Acuity is used to craft your high-end profession tools in the War Within. It was also used to buy a bunch of high-end recipes, so the more Artisan Acuity and the faster you had Artisan Acuity, the better. Which led to a lot of people picking up a profession, doing as many quests as well as like cheap NPC crafting orders that you could do to get as much acuity as possible. Then you would drop the profession, pick up a new one, rinse and repeat until you have maybe 12,000 in your inventory. Then you finally switch to the actual profession you like, craft all of the high-end tools, get all the recipes you need, and then you're good to go. You could get as much acuity as you wanted as long as you had the gold to craft all of those items for the work orders and all of that. Now, because of this, in Midnight, they have made this profession specific, so that shuffling mindset is pretty much dead. If you get Moxie from doing alchemist things, you are going to get Alchemist Moxie, so you can't use that in tailoring, you can't use that in leatherworking. That is a specific to only alchemy. Right here, if we go to the alchemy vendor, you'll see right here that there are 2 recipes for me to buy, and it requires that specific Alchemist Moxie. So right here, this is actually one of the decor pieces that I was mentioning earlier. So if I wanted to buy this, I would need 150 Moxie, but it had to actually be earned through alchemy. Same right here, this is another housing decor piece, and yet again, it also requires Moxie. So this kind of eliminates that need or that pressure to shuffle, because really you just can't do that anymore. Now, the biggest thing that's kind of up in the air as of recording of this video are profession tools. And this kind of goes into the other 3rd big change in Midnight, and that is that there is now 3 tiers of profession equipment. In the past, we have been familiar with the two different types of profession equipment. You have kind of your basic beginner BOE, which you can either just craft or buy off the auction house. This is just kind of for leveling and all of that. And then we have our higher tier BOP, meaning you have to order that through the crafting order system. And this is going to be your higher tier item that gives you a lot more skill, points, all of that. In Midnight, they are introducing a third tier, so an epic tier, which is also BOP, and at the moment, this gives you the same amount of skill, but it just gives you more of those bonus stats. But something you'll notice if you look pretty closely is that Moxie is not a reagent for these crafts. Now, in terms of if this is intended or not, we don't really know. Blizzard hasn't said anything specific, but if you do look at the currency tooltip, it says it's used in crafting profession tools and accessories. So it seems like it should be required, but it just currently isn't. So that seems weird if it wouldn't be, because that means, you know, as soon as you have the recipe, you can just have as many as you want. It just feels odd, but in Midnight, there will be 3 tiers. And the biggest thing I'll say is that if this does end up requiring Moxie, you know, let's say the epic tier as well as the rare tier both require Moxie, that might be a conversation of, okay, it's better off to just save enough Moxie for the epic one than wasting a bunch of Moxie on the rare one just to have to, you know, save it up again for the epic one, depending on, you know, what those differences are. Yet again, we can't do any of that planning just because it doesn't exist yet, but that is something to keep in mind and something to look forward to. You know, you will have that 3 tier of profession tools, and also Artisan Moxie is now going to be profession specific. Now, before we get into some fun sneak peek changes that I want to talk about, the last thing I want to mention is specializations. In general, I would like to simplify it and say that specializations look very, very similar. If you understand your current spec tree in the War Within, you're going to be pretty well off on Midnight. There are some, you know, changes because there are some new recipes, things like that. They have modified and tweaked a few things. We'll go more in depth for each profession at a later date, but in general, it's about the same. For example, I wanted to show you alchemy, and, you know, if you guys are familiar with alchemy, this will look very, very similar. We have a dedicated tree to potion crafting, with just the left side being one sort of potion, which is the light potion, and the other one being void. And this is, you know, light potions are right here, void potions are right here, so very similar to the War Within. Then we have basically a copy and paste, but this is for flask and files. So you have a dedicated potion tree and then a dedicated flask and files that also exist in the War Within. Then you have a more generic tree, and this is where there are some differences. So this is going to give you a lot of skill just towards anything that you do, and then each of these is just going to give you resourcefulness for a specific type of craft. So if you're somebody focusing on flask and files, for example, this right here is going to give you a bunch of resourcefulness when crafting those items. So that means you would want to do, you know, like these 2 nodes right here, and then you want to focus on the flask tree. Same thing applies here. This is for potions, and then this is for your reagents, transmutes, and all of that. And then lastly, we do have a dedicated transmutation tree, so this does look a lot more simplified than the current War Within one, but yet again, it's that same concept of having transmutations as its own tree. A quick overview right here, if you look at tailoring, it's basically kind of the same. You have a dedicated armor crafting tree, just like you do in the current expansion. Then you have a dedicated tree to those higher end bolt cooldowns, with one side being one bolt and the other side being the other. Then you kind of have your generic tree right here, which is going to give you a bunch of skill, a bunch of resourcefulness, some more skills, some ingenuity, as well as multi-craft. So this kind of just affects everything. And then yet again, following the same outlines, is that you have yet again another sort of generic tree, but this also does your cloth gathering and all of that. So yet again, very similar. This is going to increase your drop chance to find cloth. This is also going to give you a bunch of skill. Going here is going to give you some multi-craft. Going here is going to give you ingenuity, as well as other, you know, cloth drop bonuses, things like that. So if you are familiar with the current specializations, everything kind of looks the same. If you are somebody who doesn't have access to beta and you don't want to wait for a bunch of videos, the current talent calculator or profession tree calculator on Wowhead's website is up to date. I'll have it linked in the description, so feel free to go on that website and pull up, the current specialization trees in the War Within, compare that to the Midnight on the website, and you can kind of start planning and seeing where the little differences are. But with that being said, that is kind of the main points that I want to make in today's video, but I do want to leave off with just a few sneak peeks into some professions and let you know about some changes that are happening that I think are either going to make you laugh or make you a little bit excited. Starting out with alchemy, I can officially say that the RNG discovery system of recipes is officially gone, which I know was a pain point for a lot of people, and we will no longer have to rely on that in Midnight. Instead, they've decided to still keep kind of a research system, but it's very, very simplified, and let me show you a quick sneak peek. What's going to happen is whenever you pick up alchemy and you make it to the main city, there is your, of course, alchemy trainer, and then you have a little cauldron right here, which is going to be your alchemy research. And when you open this cauldron, this is going to have all of the recipes that you can quote-unquote research and unlock. So an example right here is if you wanted to learn the Primal Philosopher's Stone, which is just one of the new items that alchemy can do. As you can see, you need at least 10 skill in alchemy, which means I just need to, level up my profession a little bit, and then I can learn this recipe. We can actually just quickly craft some few things right now to get that. All right, we're at level 9. There we go, we were at 10. If we go in here, we can now learn this recipe. If we click research, we'll gain the recipe. There we go, we can now craft this, and that is gone from this table. So yeah, instead of having to rely on this RNG, you kind of have these mini sort of achievements that you can complete, and you'll get new recipes. And all of them are pretty simple. This one right here is to craft flasks 10 times. This one is also 10 times. This one's 15 files. This right here is crafting void potions 10 times. You'll see that these are going to use that Artisan Moxie, so once again, it's that specific alchemist version. And then if we jump over down here to like transmutations, in order to get this transmute, you need to just perform 10 other transmutes. So this is going to be a very simple way of you learning recipes, and you no longer have to worry on that RNG. Keeping on the trend with alchemy, I want to bring up one specific item that I see, and I can't help relate it to another item that many of us have history with. If we look under transmutations, we kind of have the classic transmute one sort of type of moat to another sort of type of moat. This is pretty similar across all expansions. We also kind of have a thaumaturgy adjacent thing of that you can turn one sort of item into another. This one you can turn a bunch of fish into gems. This one you can turn enchanting materials into herbs, etc. But I want to point out this item right here. This is an actual daily cooldown transmute. As you can see at a basic level, you'll only be able to craft one a day. But as you update and level up your skill tree right here, you'll be able to do more and your cooldown will be less. But this item right here is used to craft your cauldrons this expansion, and it's also used in some of the Decor recipes. For example, this right here requires 4. Now, if you guys think back to previous expansions, specifically in Dragonflight, we had a very specific item that was very similar, and that was Dracothist. And Dracothist definitely was a gold-making feat, I would say. I think everybody remembers the hype around Dracothist and then the fall of Dracothist, and we'll just have to see exactly what happens to this item, but it does make me laugh because it looks very, very similar, and we'll see if it shares the Dracothist fate. Up next, kind of just quick things I want to point out is, of course, like I mentioned earlier, tailoring has a bunch of new bags, like always. Also, the cooldown bolts are back, so if you are somebody who likes to do that with alt armies, that is still an option. Another thing with enchanting is that shattering buff system is still in place, meaning if you shatter an item, you'll get like a temporary buff for 5 to 10 minutes. That same system is still here, so you'll level that up for Midnight specifically, and that's just going to give you more multi-craft, more stats, and all of that. We still get a dedicated disenchanting tree in enchanting, so disenchant shuffling, all of that will probably still be back at the start of the expansion, and if you're somebody who just kind of threw all your points into designated disenchanting because you don't want to deal with crafting, that is also an option. The biggest thing for blacksmithing is that buff system that was introduced in the War Within, where you kind of craft, I forget the name, the ignition item, and then that also gave you a temporary buff, that is removed, so you no longer have to worry about that for blacksmithing. You're just going to get permanent buff stats, kind of like normal, through your profession tree. And then lastly, the final thing I want to bring up is inscription. Dark Moon card crafting is back in action. Of course, there is a dedicated Dark Moon tree, but there is now the ability to mass craft Dark Moon cards. So people will still be able to get Dark Moon cards from world drops just throughout their, questing and all of that, but you will be able to mass produce cards. You'll unlock the recipe through specializations, so that will probably turn into some sort of spreadsheet calculation craft where, if you craft this much, you'll be able to craft a Dark Moon deck and sell it on the auction house. So it is very similar to kind of those older expansions where you can just mass craft them. So depending on if you like Dark Moon cards or not, that method is back for you. And of course, Inscription is also getting the most amount of new decor recipes. Inscription by far has currently the most decor recipes out of all professions, and it's also getting the most in the new expansion. So somebody who is focused on decor, if you do want a lot of options, Inscription will be your best friend. But yeah guys, before this video gets super long, I don't really want to spoil anything else, so if you guys do have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. But thank you guys so much for watching, I appreciate it. Hopefully you're excited for this series, and as always, happy gold making everybody.